Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling a very, very dark subject, the Jeffrey Dahmer case.
It's certainly one that stays with you.
Absolutely. And we've got quite a range of sources here. There's an academic piece on the trial, news reports about how he died, biographical stuff, the medical examiner's analysis, which is pretty grim.
And some general overviews, too. It gives a pretty rounded picture, even if it's a disturbing one.
Yeah, exactly. Our goal here isn't to dwell on the horror for its own sake, but to use these sources to understand what happened. The crimes, the capture, the trial, his death, the whole complex picture.
And the impact it had, which is still felt today.
Right. So let's start, I guess, chronologically with the crimes themselves and how he was eventually caught.
Okay, so the murders, they took place between 1978 and 1991, a long period.
13 years.
And in that time, he killed 17 young men and boys. His pattern, his modus operandi, was pretty consistent.
He'd lure them, often using promises of money or sex.
Yes, primarily young men and disproportionately black men back to his place. Then he'd drug them, incapacitate them.
And then strangle them.
That was the primary cause of death. But what followed was, well, horrific.
Yeah, the sources detail acts of necrophilia, cannibalism, dismemberment. He kept body parts, skulls, hearts, genitals. Took photos, too.
Some sources mention this idea of a shrine he created, using bones and skulls.
Which sounds less like trying to hide evidence and more like something else.
Exactly. Some analyses suggest it was about control, a desperate, twisted way to combat his intense loneliness, maybe, to keep them with him.
The biographical source touches on his background, fascination with dead animals as a kid, family instability, early alcohol abuse.
Factors that likely contributed to his isolation, though obviously don't excuse anything.
Of course not, but it paints a picture of someone deeply troubled early on.
And then there's that first murder, Stephen Hicks, in 1978. After that, there's this long gap, almost 9 years before the killings really started up again in 87.
What happened in that time? Do the sources give any clue why he stopped and then started again and seemingly escalated?
Not explicitly, but it's a major point of analysis. What is clear is that when he did resume killing, the brutality increased. More drugs involved, torture, dissection.
It seems like he was losing control.
Possibly. And there were these near misses with the police, the most infamous being the Conrack-Synthesamphone incident in 91.
Oh, right. The 14-year-old boy who escaped naked and bleeding, and the police actually brought him back to Dahmer.
Yes. Dahmer convinced them he was 19, his intoxicated lover. It was a catastrophic failure.
And raised huge questions about race, didn't it? Dahmer being white, the victim Laotian, in a predominantly black neighborhood, police assumptions.
Absolutely. Accusations of indifference flew.
Yeah.
It was a missed opportunity with utterly tragic consequences.
Just sickening. But then, not long after that.
A few months later, July 22nd, 1991, Tracy Edwards. He managed to escape. He still had handcuffs on, flagged down police.
And that was it. That led them inside Dahmer's apartment.
And to the discovery of, well, the House of Horrors.
The medical examiner's report details, it's hard to even list. A head in the fridge.
Multiple skulls, some painted, other intact heads, a skeleton in the freezer.
Bodies dissolving in acid in a drum.
Human heart tissue, muscle fillets, muriatic acid, solvents, clearly trying to dissolve remains.
And the Polaroids, documenting it. Plus, preserved hands, genitals, just nightmarish.
Completely. It's almost impossible to comprehend the scene investigators walked into.
So, from that discovery, it moves to the legal system. What happened next?
Well, Dahmer confessed pretty quickly and extensively. He eventually pleaded guilty to 15 murder counts in Wisconsin.
But the trial wasn't about guilt or innocence, was it? It was about his sanity.
Exactly. Was he legally sane when he committed these acts? That's what the jury had to decide.
And the trial itself, 2 weeks of testimony, must have been harrowing.
Unimaginably so. The details presented were brutal.
The academic article notes how, relatively speaking, the process moved fast. Arrest in July 91, trial concluded by February 92.
Yes. And after about 5 hours of deliberation, the jury came back.
The verdict.
Sane. They found him legally responsible for his actions at the time of the crime.
Which led to the sentencing. 15 consecutive life terms.
Right, in February 92.
Right.
Later, a 16th life term was added for a murder committed in Ohio.
Did Dahmer say anything at sentencing?
He did. He expressed remorse, accepted blame, and actually said he never wanted freedom. His lawyers confirmed there'd be no appeal.
The location is key too, isn't it? Wisconsin doesn't have the death penalty.
That's a point the article raises. You can't help but wonder how things might have gone in a state with capital punishment. Would the trial strategy have changed? The outcome?
A significant what if, but his life sentences didn't last a lifetime.
No, they didn't. He was killed in prison, November 28th, 1994.
So just over 2 years after being sentenced, how did it happen?
He was attacked by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, at the Columbia Correctional Institution, bludgeoned with a metal bar from some gym equipment.
Were they alone? What were the circumstances?
Reports say Dahmer, Scarver, and another inmate, Jesse Anderson, who Scarver also killed, were left unattended cleaning a bathroom in the prison gym.
And Scarver. He later spoke about why he did it.
He did, years later, to the New York Post. He described Dahmer's behavior in prison as deeply disturbing, making shapes resembling limbs out of prison food,
Oh, God.
using ketchup to simulate blood, apparently taunting other inmates and guards. Scarver said he mostly kept his distance until that day.
So it wasn't just the notoriety, it was Dahmer's behavior inside.
According to Scarver, yes. He felt Dahmer was unrepentant, had crossed the line. He even claimed God told him to do it, to kill both Dahmer and Anderson.
Wow. And there's that grim parallel one source mentioned.
The bludgeoning, just like Dahmer's first victim, Stephen Hicks. A chilling sort of symmetry.
He was only 34 when he died.
Yes. And while we don't know his very last words, his statement in sentencing remains his most public expression of, well, whatever it was, remorse, acceptance.
How did the public react to his death?
It was mixed, as you'd expect. Relief from many, certainly, but also some who felt it was too easy that he should have served out his life sentences.
Even his parents disagreed on what should happen afterwards, didn't they? With his brain.
That's right. His mother wanted it studied, preserved for scientific research. His father wanted everything cremated to destroy the evil, essentially.
And his father's wishes prevailed.
Yes. Both his body and brain were ultimately cremated.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The psychological side, the forensic analysis. What did the sources tell us about his mind, about the investigation itself?
Psychologically, he received several diagnoses: borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, also alcohol dependence.
So, clearly mentally disturbed. But the legal finding was sane.
Correct. Not legally insane. The consensus was he lacked empathy, lacked remorse, but understood right from wrong in a legal sense.
And the theories about why. Control, abandonment.
Those themes come up repeatedly. The idea that deep-seated fears of abandonment, maybe stemming from childhood trauma, fueled this obsessive need for control, leading to these horrific attempts to possess his victims completely.
And the forensic evidence backed up some of his claims, didn't it? The medical examiner's work.
Was crucial. Meticulous documentation. For instance, finding drilled holes in some skulls corroborated Dahmer's own admission about trying to create, why he called them zombie sex slaves.
Injecting acid or boiling water into their brains while they were still alive, it's just beyond words.
Truly. What's also striking is how cooperative he was after being caught.
He talked quite openly, didn't he, about motives, methods.
Gave investigators hours and hours of interviews, incredible insight into his thinking,
Yeah.
as disturbing as it is.
The increasing frequency of the killings toward the end, does that suggest anything?
Many analyses point to a loss of psychological control, the compulsion becoming overwhelming. There was also an anthropological suggestion he targeted a specific physical type.
Like a certain build or look.
Yeah, an anthropometric body type. Though the details aren't always specified, it's just a very specific obsessive focus.
One source mentions the medical examiner calling it a micro-disaster. What does that mean?
It highlights the sheer scale of the investigation required, even though the number of victims wasn't, say, hundreds like at a plane crash. The complexity, the resources needed, the nature of the evidence, it was overwhelming.
And the investigators faced huge challenges beyond the gruesome scene itself.
Oh, definitely. Intense media scrutiny from day one. Dealing with the victims' families, their grief and anger, and facing those serious allegations about police indifference, particularly after the Synthesome case. It was a pressure cooker.
Which brings us to the legacy, how this case echoed outwards.
It absolutely forced uncomfortable conversations about race, about how police interact with different communities, about failures in identifying and treating severe mental health issues.
And the victims' families. The pain is unimaginable and then constantly revisited.
Exactly. Every documentary, every series, it risks re-traumatizing them. Yeah. A huge ethical consideration.
I remember reading about local businessmen buying up Dahmer's stuff, the crime artifacts.
Destroying them. Yeah, a symbolic attempt by the community to cleanse itself, to reject that darkness.
Yet the fascination continues. That Netflix series recently caused a huge stir.
It did. Shows the enduring, if morbid, public interest. But it also reignited the debate about how these stories are told, who profits, and the impact on those most affected.
Are we exploiting trauma? Are we trying to understand evil? It's a difficult
A
line.
very difficult line. And Dahmer's own words. They offer little comfort, saying he didn't hate his victims, but wanted to keep them.
It speaks to that profound pathology of loneliness and control, twisted into something monstrous.
Precisely.
So, wrapping this up, it's been a heavy, deep dive. We've seen the horrifying reality of his crimes, the points where the system failed, the deep psychological disturbance, the trial, his death, and how this case just lingers.
Yeah, it casts a long shadow.
Yeah.
And like we said at the start, the goal was to understand it through these sources, not to excuse or sensationalize, just to try and grasp the different facets.
Right. So maybe the final thought for you listening, after hearing all this, what part of the Dahmer story feels the most disturbing to you? Is it the crimes themselves, the systemic failures, the psychology? What does it tell us about, I don't know, the darker potentials in society or human nature?
And what questions do you still have? There is certainly no easy answers here.
None at all. Thank you for joining us for this intense deep dive.